You are watching a woman walk into the most trusted banks in America and walk back out with fortunes that were never hers. It is December 1904, and federal agents have just cornered her inside a New York hotel suite. When they search her, they find a money belt strapped beneath her clothing, holding more than $100,000 in cash. For years, she has bought diamond necklaces, 30 closets of clothing, 8 grand pianos, 12 solid gold picture frames. Her weapon was never a gun. It was a name, the name of one of the richest men alive, a name that was not hers. And the question every banker in Ohio would soon be forced to ask was a simple one. Why did none of us check? To understand how a doctor's wife in Cleveland convinced the shrewdest financiers of the Gilded Age to hand her a fortune, you have to go back, decades back, to a small farm in rural Ontario, and to a girl who spent her afternoons doing something that should have frightened everyone around her. She was teaching herself hour after hour to copy other people's handwriting. She was born Elizabeth Bigley on the 10th of October 1857 near the village of Eastwood in Oxford County, Canada. She was the 5th of 8 children. Her father worked the railroad as a section hand. Her mother kept the house. As a girl, Elizabeth lost part of her hearing and spoke with a pronounced impediment. So she spoke rarely and chose each word with care. Her classmates thought her peculiar. Her sister Alice remembered something stranger. Elizabeth would sit for hours, meticulously practicing the signatures of everyone in the family. She was 13 or 14 when she first turned that skill into money. She wrote herself a letter forged in the hand of an imaginary wealthy uncle in England, announcing that he had died and left her an inheritance. She carried the forgery to a local bank, and the bank opened an account and issued her real checks against money that did not exist. When it collapsed, the authorities let her go with a warning. And that was the lesson that would shape the rest of her life. The system was built on confidence, and it almost never checked. She escalated quickly. At 16, she ran from home and tried to talk a prosperous farmer out of a promissory note. In her early 20s, she reinvented herself in Toronto as Elizabeth Cunard, a member of the famous shipping family, and swindled merchants out of some $10,000 in luxury goods on credit before the scheme collapsed. Back home, she printed elegant calling cards announcing herself as an heiress to $15,000 and used them to charm cash out of shopkeepers. In 1879, standing trial in Woodstock for forgery. She rolled her eyes, stared into space, and made faces at the jury until they acquitted her by reason of temporary insanity. Her family, out of options, sent her across the border to a married sister in Cleveland. She would never stop running the same con. She would only make it bigger. In Cleveland, she became someone else, and then someone else again. She moved into her sister's home, quietly wrote down every piece of furniture in the house, and used the list as collateral to borrow cash against possessions that were not hers. Thrown out, she reinvented herself as Madame Lydia de Vere, a clairvoyant, a cash business that gave her a stage and a steady stream of other people's secrets. She married and married again. In Erie, Pennsylvania, working as Madame Rosa, she once drew blood from her own gums to convince bystanders she was hemorrhaging, and pocketed the money they gave her for a doctor. Then, operating out of Toledo, she forged the signature of a Youngstown merchant on a note, and talked a man named Joseph Lamb into cashing forged promissory notes worth $40,000 on her behalf. This time the con did not slip away. In 1889, she was convicted of forgery and sentenced to nearly a decade in the Ohio penitentiary. The clerk logged her by the era's new biometric measurements: chestnut eyes, black hair, a small burn scar on one elbow, as though a woman like this could be filed away on a card. Even behind bars, she kept working her audience, telling the warden that he would lose $5,000 and die of cancer, and holding the prison staff half convinced she had real powers. She served about 4 years. In 1893, she was paroled by the governor of Ohio, a man named William McKinley, who would go on to become president of the United States. She walked out and became Cassie Hoover, keeping a house in Cleveland that polite society called a boarding house, and everyone else called something less respectable. And it was there she met the man who would give her the one thing every con she had ever run was missing: legitimacy. Dr. Leroy Chadwick was a wealthy, respected physician from one of Cleveland's oldest families. He knew nothing of her record. In 1897, he married her. Overnight, the forger from Ontario was Mrs. Cassie Chadwick, mistress of a mansion on Euclid Avenue. Millionaires Row, the most aristocratic street in the city, home to relations of the Rockefellers and a United States senator. She wanted to dominate that street. But there was a problem that could destroy everything. Her husband was rich only on paper. His money was locked in real estate that was losing value, and he did not have the cash to fund the life his new wife intended to lead. To rule Millionaires Row, Cassie Chadwick needed a line of credit with no ceiling. So she invented one. And to build it, she chose the single most powerful name in America. In the spring of 1902, Cassie Chadwick traveled to New York and took a suite at the Holland House, a hotel famous for a wine cellar valued at roughly $250,000. She waited in the lobby until she encountered a prominent Ohio lawyer, a friend of her husband, and asked him to escort her by carriage to her father's house. She directed the driver to Fifth Avenue, to the vast new mansion of Andrew Carnegie, the Scottish-American steel magnate, then one of the wealthiest men on earth. The lawyer waited in the carriage. Chadwick climbed the steps and was led inside. She never met Carnegie. Instead, she spent nearly half an hour speaking with his staff, on the invented pretext of checking the references of a former maid she claimed she wanted to hire. To the man waiting outside, it looked exactly like what she needed it to look like: a daughter, home for a private family visit. When she returned to the carriage, she let slip a large brown envelope. As the lawyer picked it up, he saw that it held promissory notes signed by Andrew Carnegie. Feigning distress, she swore him to secrecy and confessed the lie that would make her fortune. She was Carnegie's secret, illegitimate daughter. Out of guilt, she said, he had quietly given her $5 million in securities and more than $7 million in notes, and one day she would inherit an estate worth $400 million. She had chosen this man precisely because he could not keep a secret and because his world was Ohio banking. The very rooms where a rumor like this would travel fastest and farthest. Back in Ohio, the whisper spread through Cleveland's banks exactly as she intended. Now came the machinery. She carried a sealed package to Ira Reynolds, an officer at Cleveland's Wade Park Banking Company, and asked him to lock it in the vault for safekeeping. Inside, she said, were $5 million in Carnegie securities and 2 enormous promissory notes. She asked him to sign a receipt attesting to the contents. When he hesitated, she took offense. Did he wish to open it and question the word of Carnegie's daughter? Unwilling to insult her, Reynolds signed without looking. Had he opened the envelope, he would have found clumsy forgeries riddled with misspellings. Instead, he had just handed her a document signed by a respected banker swearing she held a Carnegie fortune. With that receipt, Cassie Chadwick could borrow almost without limit. And here it is worth stopping to see what she was actually running, because it was not simply a string of loans. It was a Ponzi scheme. Each new loan paid the crushing interest on the last, so the money kept circulating and every lender stayed satisfied as long as fresh lenders kept arriving. Nothing was ever truly repaid. The whole structure lived or died on one thing: that no one would ask for their principal back all at once. To keep it fed, she offered terms no greedy banker could resist: interest rates as high as 25%, and private bonuses to the men who arranged the loans. Because the debts were supposedly backed by Carnegie's bottomless credit, the bankers saw almost no risk. And none of them dared contact Carnegie to confirm that he had an illegitimate daughter. To do that was to risk offending the most powerful man in America and losing access to his fortune forever. Their own silence was her best protection. The money came in from everywhere. $29,000 from one Cleveland bank, $38,000 from another, $10,000 from a bank in Elyria, and $800,000 from a single Pittsburgh steel magnate. But her deepest wound landed in the small college town of Oberlin. The president of Citizens National Bank there, C.T. Beckwith, was so dazzled by the Carnegie name that he lent her sums totaling into the hundreds of thousands, roughly 4 times everything his bank actually held. Think of your own bank lending 4 times every dollar in its vaults to one stranger it had never verified on the strength of a rumor. When the bank ran dry, Beckwith began lending her his own money, more than $100,000 of it, and quietly signed banknotes on her behalf. He had stopped being a banker. He had become a believer, and the money he was gambling was not only his own. It belonged to the townspeople and to the students of Oberlin College who had trusted the bank with their tuition and their board. For more than 2 years, the wheel kept turning. Cassie Chadwick spent like a woman who could never run out. She threw dinner parties said to cost $100,000, bought trays of uncut gems, and filled her closets until Cleveland gave her a title: the Queen of Ohio. But a Ponzi scheme has no ending except collapse. And the collapse began with one man who simply would not be charmed. His name was Herbert Newton, a Boston banker. In early 1904, he had lent Chadwick more than $190,000 against a note for $1 million, part business check, part his own personal funds, and the interest kept climbing. By late that year, uneasy about how much he was owed, he asked for his money back. Chadwick did what she always did. She took offense and insisted her millions in Carnegie securities sat perfectly safe in the Wade Park vault. Newton was not a man who could be soothed by indignation. He wanted to see the money. On the 2nd of November 1904, Herbert Newton filed a federal lawsuit in Cleveland and demanded the bank freeze her assets. That single lawsuit broke the code of silence that had protected her for years. Regulators now had legal cause to open the sealed envelope in Ira Reynolds' vault, the $5 million in Carnegie securities that no banker had ever dared inspect. They opened it. Inside, where $5 million in Carnegie securities were supposed to sit, were worthless amateurish forgeries. The same crude misspellings a single careful glance would have caught years and hundreds of thousands of dollars earlier. Now at last, the bankers did the one thing none of them had been willing to do. They contacted Andrew Carnegie. His answer was swift and public, and it ended her. He told the press he did not know any Mrs. Chadwick of Cleveland. He added dryly that he was flattered his credit was still good, but that he had not signed a promissory note in more than 30 years. The man whose name had underwritten a fortune had never met her, never signed a thing, and now said so to the entire country. Carnegie was not her accomplice. He was the one person she had counted on never being asked. As panic tore through the Ohio banks, Cassie Chadwick fled to New York and took a room at the Hotel Breslin. Federal authorities traced her there. On the 7th of December 1904, they arrested her in her suite. And when they searched her, they found the last, desperate truth of the whole scheme strapped to her body: a money belt stuffed with more than $100,000 in cash. After years of borrowing millions on a lie, this was what she had left. Not securities, not a Carnegie inheritance, just cash, hidden against her skin that she could carry when she ran. The arrest did to Oberlin exactly what everyone had feared. News that the Queen of Ohio was a fraud triggered a run on Citizens National Bank, and the bank hollowed out. Having loaned 4 times its capital into a lie, could not survive it. It closed its doors and declared bankruptcy. The savings of the town went with it. So did the money of Oberlin College students who had done nothing but deposit their tuition and board in the local bank. Young people who woke to find the accounts that were supposed to see them through the year simply gone. C.T. Beckwith, the president who had believed, was financially ruined and charged with violating banking law. He died before he could ever stand trial. This is the part the legend tends to skip. Cassie Chadwick did not steal from Andrew Carnegie, who lost nothing. She stole from a small Ohio town and from students, and from a man who trusted her enough to gamble everything he had. Her own trial opened in Cleveland in March 1905, and it became a spectacle larger than the news of the day. Reporters wrote that it drew bigger crowds and heavier coverage than the inauguration of President Theodore Roosevelt. Andrew Carnegie himself came to watch the woman who had defrauded a nation in his name. When they showed him the forged notes, he studied the misspellings and the errors and marveled aloud that seasoned bankers had ever accepted them as real. Her lawyers tried to make her the victim, a naive woman preyed upon by greedy, usurious men who had forced ruinous interest upon her. The prosecution answered with the wreckage: a federally chartered national bank destroyed, widows and orphans stripped of everything they had saved. On the 10th of March 1905, the jury convicted her on 7 counts of conspiracy against a national bank and against the government. She was fined $70,000 and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Even the most conservative accounting of the cash that vanished when her scheme fell, around $630,000, is close to $24 million in today's money, extracted single-handedly by a woman the entire financial establishment had assumed incapable of it. In January 1906, Cassie Chadwick entered the Ohio Penitentiary in Columbus. Her fame followed her inside. She was allowed to bring several large trunks packed with the last of her luxuries: animal skin rugs, designer clothing, fine furniture, and the warden let her keep them in her cell. It was the final performance of a woman who had spent a lifetime insisting she belonged among the wealthy. But the performance could not hold in a prison cell. Cut off from movement and opulence, she broke down. The prison physician described a total nervous collapse. She could not sleep. She lost more than 30 pounds. By some accounts, she went blind. 3 weeks before the end, while meeting with her adult son Emil, she collapsed and was carried to the prison hospital. She slipped into a coma and never woke. The prison physician recorded her death as a failure of the heart and could not resist adding that years of overindulgence in rich food had helped bring it on. Cassie Chadwick died on the 10th of October 1907, her birthday, 50 years to the day from the birth of Elizabeth Bigley on an Ontario farm. Her son reached the prison 15 minutes after she was gone. She was buried back in Eastwood, the village where it all began. Paid for with a cache of money she had told her son where to find. Even in death, she had one last hidden sum tucked away. The instinct of the girl who forged an inheritance letter had never left her. There is a coda to the story that belongs to Andrew Carnegie. He owed the people of Oberlin nothing. His name had been stolen, he had lost not a cent, and he was, in the plainest terms, a victim of the crime rather than a party to it. And yet, because it had been done in his name, he gave $15,000 to reimburse the ruined students and $125,000 more to build a library at Oberlin College. The man Cassie Chadwick had cast as her secret father chose, in the end, to quietly repair a little of what she had done to strangers. What she had truly exploited was never Andrew Carnegie. It was a system that ran on names and trust and gentlemen's agreements, in which the word of the right person mattered more than any document, and in which no one wanted to be the one who checked. She understood that the bankers of the Gilded Age were guarding less against fraud than against embarrassment, and that the fear of insulting the powerful could be a heavier vault door than any lock. She weaponized their reverence for wealth, and their certainty that a woman could not possibly outthink them. Both assumptions were wrong, and the second one was the con inside the con. For a few short years, a farm girl from Ontario had made the richest man in America her silent partner without his knowledge, and turned a name she had no right to into millions in real cash. Her fraud helped force a more careful, more skeptical era of American banking into being, a system built in part to make sure no one could ever again borrow a fortune on a name alone. Cassie Chadwick never possessed a single genuine Carnegie signature. What she possessed was the one thing the bankers valued more: the confidence to act as if she did, and the certainty that no one would ever dare ask her to prove it. Tell me in the comments, Was Cassie Chadwick a genius who outsmarted a system built to shut her out? Or just a forger the powerful were too proud to question? If a story like this holds you, there's another waiting. Keep watching.